All right, welcome back to another episode of the Four Wide Podcast. As always, Jeremiah Stoddard, Jonathan Williams, and Dan Kiley. Yesterday, Super Bowl, Eagles and Chiefs did not disappoint. That game was very fun to watch, very entertaining, a lot of action, a lot of stuff going on. There were some things that surprised me personally, and I know it surprised you guys as well. So we'll jump straight into this game real quick. And Jonathan, I'll start with you. Just your initial reaction to just seeing how everything played out. Just, I know it's a broad statement, but just kind of summarize real quick, and then we'll dive deeper into it after.
Well, someone that didn't have a dog in the fight, wasn't a fan of either team really, and honestly didn't care who won the football game. Generally, didn't care who won. I would have been fine with regardless of who ended up coming out on top. It was a fantastic game, in these championship games where, like I said, you're not necessarily rooting for anybody. All you're really hoping for is a big game. You want a proper ending to the season. And it was a proper ending to the season. That game in its entirety was great. Both Mahomes and Jalen Hurts played great. And it was close the entire time. Both teams fought really hard, and then it just ended up being that the Kansas City Chiefs had a way better game plan in the second half, and they executed it better, and they were the better football team at the end of the day, and they closed out strong, and the Eagles most definitely did not. They seemed really discombobulated there in the second half. Multiple delayed games. One ended up costing you a timeout, which you really could have used later in the game. Maybe could have saved you some extra seconds to where maybe you get into position to get a game-tying field goal there late in the game. But, that's just if, ands, or buts. That didn't happen. So, but I don't know. I feel like I feel like that game came down to whoever had the best coach was going to win. And Andy Reid was far and away the better coach in that football game. And the Chiefs won, rightfully so. And they have their second Super Bowl championship in 4 years. And Patrick Mahomes seems to be just on the start of his great run in the NFL, because it doesn't seem like the Kansas City Chiefs are going anywhere, because everybody said, a Tyreek Hill, how are they going to be? Well, they're Super Bowl champions. That's what they are.
General takeaway for me is it was a tale of two completely different football games. The first half was Eagles dominated, and then the second half was just Andy Reid and all of his genius. And that's one of the biggest takeaways for me, I think, is that I think most all of us have underestimated how good of a coach Andy Reid actually is. He was scheming guys completely wide open. I mean, you're in the Super Bowl against arguably the best defense in the NFL, and you had guys that are no defender within 15, 20 yards of them. And that just comes down to coaching at the end of the day. And that's the one thing for me, at least, that I took for granted was how good of a coach Andy Reid is. And Nick Sirianni, obviously in his first year as the Eagles head coach, did a remarkable job of getting them to the Super Bowl, but just wasn't enough at the end of the day because Andy Reid put on a freaking clinic on how to coach a football team.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, it was a tale of two halves. Like the Eagles came out so strong early on, and then all of a sudden they kind of get that defensive touchdown, and it kind of just flips the script from there. Like where all of a sudden the Kansas City feels like they're back in the game. That they're not getting ran out, ran out the club kind of thing. And then from then on, like it's just they started to click in the second half. I think Jonathan and I were talking about this prior to the show. I mean, they scored on every single drive in the second half, and that's insane. Like it as soon as you do that, the Eagles don't have a chance. Like if you cannot stop them from putting points on the board at any given time, even if it's a field goal, like I mean, that's you have no chance of winning that game anymore. You stop playing defense at that point. My biggest takeaway from it was we sat here last week and we started talking about my keys to the game for the Eagles were two things. Was one, you get to Mahomes, put some pressure on it. Y'all did it very well against San Francisco, and you made them very uncomfortable. Hassan Reddick being one of the players like that, and he was just beating up the right tackle for San Francisco. Well, nobody got in the backfield again to Mahomes. Mahomes was not touched in the pocket. He did not get sacked. That's huge. Like, as soon as you don't do that, you don't really have a chance to slow them down offensively either. He's got way too much time, and like you said a second ago, Andy Reid just is way too good at getting people open. So if you're not pressuring Mahomes and getting in his face, he's going to find somebody. Second thing was, I mean, you get up early, right? And your team has ran the ball extremely well all season long, and you just don't really have a run game. Your run game stalls out. Your rushing offense is Jalen Hurts with 75 or something like that yards in the game. Like when your quarterback becomes your rushing offense, you're in trouble. That's the other thing, because they have done extremely, extremely well. Miles Sanders has ran the ball well all season long, and he only had, let me check real quick. He had
a very quiet game.
16
he
yards.
had 16 yards. And then Kenneth Gainwell had 21 yards. Your running backs combined for 37 yards. I mean, that's bad. That's where you start focusing for the Eagles offense. And I think if you start running the ball better, you keep once again you keep the Eagle or the Chiefs off the field more. You don't let them have so many scoring opportunities. That's how you win that game, and they didn't do it.
I think, where I missed the boat a little bit was, Jonathan knows that I've been talking about all season long, whoever has the best ability to run the game or run the ball would have a chance to win the football game. And with the defensive front and the front eight that the Eagles had, I just knew that the Chargers or the Chiefs could not run the football at all. And they were almost a no-show. Their defensive line didn't get pressure. Their linebackers, there were a couple plays I put, I believe it was number 57 was on skates because Travis Kelce had him spinning in the dirt trying to find him, and he got open in the field that way. But that's the one part that I completely missed on. I thought the front eight, the front seven, or whatever the case may be, of the Eagles would be completely dominant, and they just really weren't.
Yeah, speaking of, Isaiah Pacheco had a heck of a game. I told Stoddard we were discussing about like Patrick Mahomes winning the MVP, and we were both kind of shocked that he did. But then when you go look at the stat line, it was like, well, who the heck else were you going to give it to? And I said, well, I felt like Isaiah Pacheco had a good game, and he had about 75 rushing yards. And I'm interested because, Dan, you've been on here several times, kind of not necessarily hating on him, but kind of throwing some shade a little bit to Clyde Edwards-Helaire, just kind of the lack of run game that Kansas City has had all year. But I think they kind of found something in Pacheco there late in the season. He was really effective in the playoffs, and I think he's great in the receiving game. And obviously he was effective in the run game against a really talented defensive front. So I'm interested to see about how that running back room looks moving forward, because if I were the Chiefs, I might start leaning more towards Pacheco at this point, especially because, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is now this will be his upcoming fourth year in the NFL, or maybe even more than that. And now you got another guy, Pacheco, and they just cycle through these running backs now in the NFL. So it might be Pacheco's room now. It might be his. And I think he's definitely earned it. He deserved it there in the Super Bowl. But yeah, I don't think that either team did anything to lose that football game. I just think that the Chiefs and Andy Reid went out there and won the football game, if that makes sense. Like the Eagles, like you look back in the game, there was really nothing that they did that just kind of blew that game. I know everybody's going to highlight the penalty or whatnot, but like there was never a point in the game where it was like Philadelphia just like crumpled apart or just fell apart. It was just that Kansas City came out in the second half and they were just the better football team. And Andy Reid put together a better game plan than Nick Sirianni did for the Eagles. And I just feel like that's how that game went. It was just a matter of who was going to be the better team when it mattered most, and Kansas City was a better team.
Well, Kansas City needed to make a play, and Jalen Hurts dropping the football. And Jalen Hurts played a hell of a football game, boys. I mean, I'm not taking anything away from the guy. He was running out of the pocket, but he just dropped the football. And then it results in a scoop and a score. And Kansas City had no momentum at that point, and that really got them back in the football game. Now, did it win the game for them? No. They still went to the halftime down 10, so they still had a lot of work to do, right, gentlemen? But at that point in the game, Kansas City had nothing. They weren't generating anything on offense. Like, it blew my mind. Obviously, because I was with a bunch of different people. I didn't even realize that Kansas City only had 3 possessions in the first half. That's crazy. And then they only scored 1 touchdown in the second half because they only had 1 possession in the third quarter. So are you talking about through 3 quarters, Kansas City only had 4 possessions of offense? That's pretty incredible.
And I think that's a sign of last week I talked about Philadelphia has to just stick to their game plan. They're more methodical in their drives. I think they had a 17-play drive. Now, it only resulted in a field goal, but that's what you need against a team like Kansas City. You want to keep the ball out of Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid's hands. That's what you want to do to beat a team like that, and they were really effective at that there in the first half. I did not know that they only had 3 possessions. That's pretty crazy. But so that's my point is like Philadelphia was great in the first half. It's why they went into the locker room with a 10-point lead. I just don't think that they were able to continue that there in the second half, and Kansas City was able to flip a switch off of a mistake that Philadelphia had, and the rest was history at that point.
Well, but here's the thing. Like, when you talk about that, I highlight the exact same moment that Dan did, because they have a 10-point lead going into the second half, but they gave them 7 points on that fumble. So they could have had a 17-point lead. And at that point, it's a whole different ballgame, because once again, in that second half, I mean, the Eagles were still scoring. They were still putting points on the board. And, that extra 7 points was the difference in the game when it comes down to it. That one thing, it's one thing to turn the ball over when it's a scoop and score and it put 7 points on the board when a team only had 3 possessions in the first half. I mean, that's huge. That's the game-changing moment right there that really changes every bit of like everything. I mean, all of a sudden, now you're back in the game. Yeah, you're only down 10 points at halftime when you should be down 17. And at that point in the NFL, 17-point lead is huge. And the Eagles played very well in the second half overall as well. They wouldn't have had a chance to come back in that game had they not fumbled. And it was weird. Like we said, like he literally just dropped the ball.
That's
Like,
the shame of it.
like it's literally you're scrambling this way and you're holding it to your side and it just falls out of your hand. Like the most bizarre. I literally looked at it when it happened. I was like, "What the crap just happened? Like, how did you just drop the ball
And that's the
Moments
shame of
too
it now
big.
because
straight down the leg?"
Yeah, because Jalen Hurts played, like I said, a whale of a game. 27 of 38, 304, one
Yeah.
touchdown. But running
Oh, and
the ball
add in the
was-
fact that he had 70 yards rushing.
and 3 touchdowns on the ground. Plus, he had a 2-point conversion on the ground. I mean,
He tied
played a whale of
Terrell
a game.
Davis's. He
Four
tied
total
Terrell Davis's
touchdowns.
record.
4
Well,
total touchdowns and a 2-point conversion.
And that's why I say it's so difficult, and that's the shame of it, is because he played such a fantastic football game. Now,
did.
listen, if you get hit, like a hard hit, we've all seen it, right? Where a guy's fighting for extra yards or something like that, takes a big shot and the ball comes out. Like, you can explain that away. I mean, obviously, it's never good. You don't want that to happen. But, like, when it happens, you understand. Like, those
Right.
things happen in football games. But, like, when you just literally drop the ball, and I'm sure that nobody on the Eagles is just absolutely crapping on Hurts today because the guy, if without him, you're not. I mean, you
No,
don't even have a
That's
game.
the only
But-
mistake he made in the entire game, man. Like that's it.
and he's going to live with that now, and that's a shame.
Well, and
All
it,
right,
it comes down to sorry, this is the thing I always like to say. My coach always said this too. If you're in a game and you try to pinpoint one singular play as why you win or lose that game, then like you're not paying attention to everything else. And so I can sit here all day and I can make that comment and say that's a game-changing moment, and it is. But there's still so much more. Like defensively, your defense has to pick you up. Your defense has given up 7 points each game, 7 points, and they give up 38 in the Super Bowl. Like that's moments too big, straight down your leg kind of moment right there. Like your defense has to make it to where that one play that you made an error on offense does not lose you the game. That's my problem with it.
All right, I think this is a perfect time to talk about this because we have to talk about it. Is the penalty call there at the end? Talking about Stoddard, you said you can't just pinpoint one moment in the game because there's so many other moments. Like I've said before, every single player that was on that football field last night could have went down their plays or any moment in that game and said, man, if I had done this, that game might have ended differently. Everybody can make those moments. Everybody has those memories in that game. But the big one that everybody is taking away, and I feel like in every single big game like this, especially when they're close, you're going to have a moment where it's like, man, they missed this call and that's what affected the game. Like that. And if unfortunately the refs get a lot of heat for it. And I don't know, like there's a big debate on whether or not it was holding. Me personally, I'm not here for the whole, like in that moment, you can't call that because look, if anybody's on the other side, you want that flag thrown. And he very much grabbed the jersey. And by textbook ruling, that is holding. Like you are supposed to call that. When you see that, that is holding. So I'm just here to say that.
Did.
Yeah, I mean,
James Bradbury
came out
called it
and
himself.
Said, yeah,
and said he
I
did.
grabbed the jersey. That's holding. They called it. It is what it is. And I just like, and I want to say too, like Philadelphia fans, that is not what lost you the game. What lost you the game is, like I said earlier, you had gosh, what's the word I'm trying to look for right now? Oh, I'm completely blanking right now. Where you have two moments where you had to waste a timeout because you could not get the snap off in time. So that's a big moment right there. You had to waste one of your timeouts. That was crucial there at the end. Came back to bite you in the butt. And then also you let Kansas City, like we said, score every single possession in the second half. That's what lost you the game. Those are the two big things. Those two things are way bigger, in my opinion, than a referee doing his job and calling what he is supposed to in that moment. As I said, if any of us are Kansas City Chiefs fans, we want that flag thrown, and rightfully so. That flag should have been thrown, in my opinion, from an outsider's perspective or whatever you want to call it.
I mean, you're absolutely right. You have to officiate the game properly. It was the right call. And the argument was, everybody kept saying, "I can't believe you called pass interference in that." They didn't. They called defensive
not.
holding because that's
Exactly.
what they did. It was
Yeah.
it was clear as day. The jersey, you could see the jersey being pulled away from his body. It was clear. Now, like even was it Bradbury? Is that his name?
James Bradbury, yeah.
Yeah. He said, I was hoping I was going to get away with it. He knew what he did, but to his point is, if he didn't hold him, he's walking in for a touchdown. So
Yes,
in
gets away
his
from him.
mind, defensive backs a lot of times are taught that if you're going to give up a touchdown, just go ahead and commit the penalty because we have another opportunity to stop them then at that point, right? And then what that ended up doing though is it gave them a first down with no timeout, so they're able to run it all the way down and then kick the field goal and leave you no time. I mean, it was just a really bad time for that play to happen. It was nothing like giving the Chiefs 2 third downs in the previous game. That was the late hit out of bounds. That was clear as day. That had to be called. But the giving the Chiefs 2 third downs, that was horse crap. And I think that's the part that everybody had a real problem with, or should have had a real problem with. But it was just bad timing. But it was the right call. We were
and once again, it was the right move by James Bradbury. He did what he needs to do right there.
I think we all agreed. We all agreed it was the right call, but we all agree that we hate it when a call changes the outcome of the game.
When the game kind of boiled down to that.
Correct. I mean, but
and it's just because it happens in the moment. Yeah,
right.
It happens right there at the end of the game, so that's what everybody focuses on, right? Same thing I said last week about the Kansas City one where Patrick Mahomes gets hit going out of bounds. It's definitely a penalty. I mean, it is. And to sit here, but at the same time to say that is why they won that game, no, man, they still had time on the clock. They could have still moved forward 10 more yards, 15 more yards to be able to kick that field goal. If you don't think Mahomes was capable of getting 15 more yards that he got off that penalty with enough time to kick a field goal like that, they still could have and probably would have won that game regardless. Sure. Same thing goes on that penalty, right? They're already in field goal range, are they not?
Oh, hell yeah. But that would have been third down.
Oh, they needed a touchdown, didn't they? They needed a touchdown.
No, so
they needed a touchdown.
When that penalty happened, if let's just say that they don't throw it, right? Now it's fourth down, they kick a field goal, and there's a minute and 38 seconds, I think it was, what they were saying on the radio today, 1:38. So now the Eagles down 3 points would have had a minute and 38 to drive the field with no timeouts, but they would have had time. But because you called the penalty, rightfully so, they run it down to 8 seconds. You kick it off, you run it back 3 yards or whatever, and now you have 5 seconds. And you know what? Right. A lot of people were making a joke about the way he threw the ball on that Hail Mary, right?
It had to slip, man.
It was 67 yards. Everybody's making – he threw the ball 67 yards. Yeah, I mean, he had to throw the ball 70 or 80 something to get it into the end zone, but he threw it 67 from where he let it go.
Did he really throw it that far?
Yeah. I mean,
it didn't look like
on
it because
a line.
It still looked like
he lobbed it. That sucker was on a line too.
I think he either misplanted his foot or it slipped a little bit out of his hand because of the trajectory that it took.
Yeah,
just because of the line. Because anyone throwing a Hail Mary is not throwing the ball 10, 15 feet off the ground the whole way. It's going to be a lob shot, and it was a weird throw, and so it looked strange. That's the problem. I didn't realize it went that far. No, I really didn't.
Can we talk about that football field? This is what I want to say about it. So there was clearly issues about the football field the entire night. And I think that Arizona Stadium is really cool about how they play in a dome, but they play on actual grass, how they roll it out there and they're able to give it the necessary sunshine and whatnot or whatever else to grow their own grass and play on an actual field despite being in a dome. The thing that I think is absolutely stupid is the fact that you want to test this new kind of grass that someone's like, hey, we've developed this new kind of grass, blah, blah, blah. And the NFL's like, oh, well, let's put it in the biggest game of the year for the Super Bowl. And it ends up being trash. I mean, you could tell at halftime, there was just literally clumps of grass all over the field, piles of cleats on the Eagles sidelines because they're slipping all over the place. Now, they said that the Chiefs didn't have any issues with it, but Philadelphia clearly did. And I mean, heck, Elliott, the Eagles kicker, about snapped his ankle in half on one of the kickoffs because he slipped and just almost snapped his crap in half. I mean,
$800,000 for that
$800,000.
$800, yeah. But the crazy part is,
who
was doing the game for Fox? What was the analyst?
Olsen and Burkhardt.
Olsen. So it was Olsen. He said, because he was kicking in the paint there, and he said that I hope Bucker doesn't slip on this field goal kick. If you watch it, he does slip a little bit. Now, granted, he hit the ball first, right? So the ball was true, but watch his plant foot. His
foot starts to slide.
Yeah. So thank God he hit it the way he hit it, because if not, I mean, that one had been the story of the Super Bowls, that the guy blows a kick.
That's about
'Cause he
as dumb
slips.
as
That would
that's
have been
about
nuts.
as dumb as SoFi Stadium letting in water when it rains. That,
Why am
those
I
two
getting
things
wet watching the national championship game when it's
Same thing, man.
like, come on now,
Goodness
man.
gracious!
If you're gonna put a canopy on it, at least make it waterproof.
I just don't
That
get
was
it.
stupid.
The Super Bowl championship games in general are never the time to experiment with the freaking playing field. It's like the only thing that's even for
No.
both sides, but nonetheless, it seemed to really screw over some situations in that football game, and the players were definitely fed up with it. So I just thought that was ridiculous. I didn't get it at all, and clearly
So-
not $800,000 well spent.
As I was making my way home trying to get here for the show, I was listening to 680 The Fan, and they were playing all the calls this morning from Philadelphia radio. What is the one person who they put this blame on? Who do you think is the person they are blaming for this loss?
Gosh,
One
I don't
player?
know.
Is it a player or a coach?
Bradbury? I don't know.
No, it's Gannon, the defensive coordinator, who is interviewing today with the Cardinals. And they are
Well-
giving him hell because he made no adjustments in the second half, could
I
not
was gonna
stop.
say,
Go
yeah.
ahead.
So
No,
I guess
no,
if there's one person to blame,
Yeah,
their defense, like I said, their defense had given up 7 points every game on average, and then all of a sudden you give up 38 in the biggest game of the year. I mean, and like you said, you don't make adjustments, you don't change things. Like, you know what? That's not that far off.
No, and this one lady was like damn near crying, talking about that's not my Philadelphia defense. I don't know what that was, but
I'd be pissed too. I'd be pissed.
I mean, it was insane. Like, I mean, I couldn't have been more confident in a group of a position group than I was of that defensive line. Now, a lot of people are saying it's the field, that they were not able to get any kind of attraction and they couldn't get a pass rush. It's one of the things that I don't know if we sent it in the group chat that we were in or I sent somewhere else, but I don't remember Kansas City's defensive or offensive line being that stout at any point during the season.
no.
They were freaking incredible last night. Now,
And the Eagles are usually good at getting pressure too. That's the thing.
absolutely,
Like
Stop at the
they
run.
eat off of that all the time. Yeah. No, but like the weird thing is what Jonathan said a minute ago about the field is Kansas City didn't seem to have a problem with it. Like for the
Apparently,
most
they
part.
did before the half, according to the radio.
So then that means they went into the locker room and they changed their spikes to longer spikes.
Probably.
But
That's what they
everybody
did.
was.
But then what? Like it still impacted the Eagles in the second half. So that means like the equipment side of things, like they made the right call switching to longer spiked cleats, but maybe the Eagles didn't switch to like long enough. Maybe that's like what the problem was. I don't know.
I don't know.
Like, but I've seen them like depending on different type of weather games. I've seen them switch cleats to like longer spikes to get more traction because they're slipping and stuff like that. So it helps them be able to dig into the ground a little bit better. So that had to be if the Eagles were the ones still struggling in the second half with it. It had to be the difference would be the cleats at that point. And I'm not saying the cleats make the difference of the game. I'm saying that like as far as the slipping part goes, that the cleats have to be the problem.
I mean, was Philadelphia's equipment staff inaccurately equipped? Did they not bring enough?
I don't
cleats?
think they did.
I mean, I don't have the answers to it, but I mean that's a hell of a thing to do, especially when you're playing on natural grass. I've always been under the impression that every guy has got 3 different cleats. They got the shorts, the mids, and then the 3/4
You
long
should.
ones.
Yeah.
So if they didn't have 3 pairs of cleats for each player, then that's on the equipment staff. Maybe they're the ones that should have been catching hell today.
Man, so I saw this tweet today. I'm sure you guys probably saw it too, but I saw this thing that said, so Philadelphia's major teams, the Philadelphia Phillies,
I did
the
see that.
MLS soccer team, and now the Philadelphia Eagles have all lost in their championship game over the last year.
I saw
now-
something that said they're the new Georgia, new Atlanta.
I was about to say,
and
Georgia
listen-
fans know that pain, but
Matt Chernoff has a theory that John Kincaid was the jinx. He moved
That's
away
great.
from Philadelphia down here. The Eagles and the Phillies win World Championship, Super Bowl, and then he comes down here. Braves lose, Georgia loses, Falcons lose. Then he moves back to Philadelphia. Now the Georgia's winning, the Braves have already won. The Falcons are still whatever, but now all of a sudden Philly's losing. So apparently John Kincaid is a jinx. So maybe he
Oh.
needs to be sent to a town
Tough
that has
looks
no
right there.
sports.
Hey,
town.
he is officially banned from the state of Georgia. If that's the case, you can't come back. Sorry.
Lord, that's tough.
No take
Well, now
back.
what's interesting too is, like the Philadelphia 76ers, they're a good basketball team, and they very well could win the Eastern Conference. And could you imagine going 0 for 4 in championship games for all of your major teams? I mean, just burn the city down at that point. And it very well might with how crazy and insane those
Hey,
Philadelphia
they're
fans are.
nuts.
Look,
Yeah.
those jokers were up there in Philadelphia tipping cars over before kickoff of Super Bowl. Like nothing, the game hadn't even started yet, and they were out there committing property damage to some poor soul's car, just tossing it in the street, man. Those people up there are insane.
Yeah,
You know,
that's something.
The other takeaway for me is that, and you know, it's funny because they asked him after the game. They asked Travis Kelce, or I think it was Terry Bradshaw. He said, "How can no team figure out how to cover you? Like, how is that? How does that continue to happen? Like it." Every big game, he makes big plays. How is that possible that it's every single time? And I don't have an answer. I mean, I know, Jonathan, you said, you know, one of the biggest things is that they were going to have to take him away. And we thought that with the defensive backs and the linebackers,
beat you. Yeah.
Oh my God, he was just, I mean, granted, he only had one touchdown.
First drive, there was like 2 wide open spots for him.
Yeah, and then
I think they did kind of adjust later in the game a little bit, but like at the beginning of the game, man, I mean, he was just absolutely, because he ended up with 6 catches and 81 yards. Most of that came in that first half, I promise, because they were absolutely just picking them apart with him. And like you said, just wide open over the middle. I mean, it's not like they were running some like crazy routes to get him open. It's like, dude just went right over the middle and just basically standing there going, hey, right here, go ahead and throw me the ball. Like, that's crazy. That's bad.
To say they made no adjustments is unfair because, like you said, they did eventually start to cut some adjustments for him. But then what ended up happening is a guy who's been really quiet all year is Juju Smith-Schuster, who I thought was going to put up massive numbers in this offensive system, and he really hasn't. He has a good game, 7 catches, 53 yards.
Most catches on the team.
Sky Moore had a freaking touchdown play. Now, granted, it wasn't very long or anything like that, but God Almighty, was he wide open. And Kadarius Toney, that's the Florida guy, right? Who just got traded to them midseason from.
Well, he had that whip route, man. That whip route was nasty. I'm not gonna lie. The whip route's nasty. If a wide receiver can run the whip route correctly, it's unstoppable. I mean, you can't cover it.
And one of the biggest plays of the game, you know, we talked about obviously one of the biggest plays that changed the momentum to the Chiefs, right, with that fumble. But the biggest play that the Chiefs had outside of that was Kadarius Toney's return down to the 5-yard line. What was that, like a 50 or 60-yard return? 60.
Yeah, that was the longest punt return in Super Bowl history.
Oh yeah, so my son is watching the game on his phone, and he didn't tell me that he was about 30 seconds ahead of me. And he looks up at the TV and goes, he's going to run this back to the 5. I was like, he's going to do what? And then he takes off down the right sideline, and I'm looking at him going, how in the hell did you know? And then I look over, and he's just laughing his ass off. But I mean, outside of that was an incredibly huge play because that took all the pressure off of Kansas City to have to try to drive the field against that vaunted defense. And, you know, the fumble return for a touchdown, the easy yardage, easy points, right? The big punt return puts them right in the scoring position. You know, so there were things that happened for Kansas City that allow them to be able to operate a little more freely because having to drive 60, 70 yards against that defense is going to be tough, even if they're not playing at their very best. And that punt return just absolutely set them up for success. That was the Kadarius Toney. Was that the Sky Moore touchdown after that or the Toney?
I think the Toney one was the last one.
Oh, so that was the Sky Moore.
I think Toney was the last touchdown. So that was Sky Moore. No, the other thing that we haven't talked about yet, to be fair on the other side as well, like we're sitting here talking about how that 7 points was, and it still was, like that's the difference in the game overall. Harrison Butker missed a kick.
Yes,
he hit the upright. I mean, that's 3 points right there. So there's still like a 4-point difference, you know, in the favor of the Chiefs, which at the end of the game, it's a 3-point game. So it does still matter that much, but they also left points on the field and came up empty on that one because of a missed field goal. And it was funny. I was sitting there watching the game with one of my friends, and he goes, as he's coming out there, he likes Harrison Butker. And he was like, oh, best kicker in the NFL coming out here. And so then he misses it. I just start laughing. I was like, yeah, that's that Georgia Tech leg right there. Can't help it.
Is this your Georgia Tech buddy?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, yeah.
That's why he likes Harrison Butker.
That's about the only NFL player you can cheer for if you're a Tech fan.
That's what I told him. I was like, what, do you have like maybe like 4 guys in the NFL? Like, and like 2 of them I think are on the Chiefs right now.
Yeah, their best one has been long retired in Megatron. So all they got is freaking kickers and punters now.
Yeah, but it was funny because he literally goes, best kicker in the NFL," and it's just kind of like he's making a joke about it because he knows I know who he is and stuff. And then I'm like, "Yeah," and then he missed it, and I almost died laughing. I was like, "You would jinx the crap out of him real quick right before that kick, talking about it." But yeah, thought it was pretty funny.
As a sad note for us Georgia fans, Jordan Davis did not have a presence at all in the game, and neither did Ndamukong Suh. So you can't just put it on
That
Jordan
whole
Davis.
defensive line had nothing,
Right.
man. They didn't do anything.
Fletcher Cox at least had a tackle.
The boys looked tired from what I saw.
Yeah.
I mean, well, they probably the crazy thing was, I think that was about an 11-minute and maybe 11 and some change minute difference in the time of possession. So it's not even like they were out there very long. They had Chiefs only had the ball for 24 minutes compared to 35 for the Eagles. So you would think that they shouldn't be so gassed out there, but they were. And maybe that's the problem, where just maybe all of a sudden that Chiefs offensive line was just so much better than we expected them to be. But like at that point, if they're stonewalling you like that, that's when your defensive coordinator's got to come up with, run some stunts, get your linebackers blitzing, get something to get some pressure. You have got to figure out something to throw them off of what they're doing. You cannot line up and just rush 4 and 5 guys. You have no chance. They're stonewalling you. That's a huge adjustment that should have been made, is start sending some linebackers, do something. But at the same time, they're probably scared to do that because guess what? Kelsey, right over the middle. As soon as you take your linebackers out, they're right there. Like it's, damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of thing sometimes. And they picked their poison, and it just didn't work.
No doubt.
The Eagles receivers did a really good job of getting catches. Do they just like AJ Brown? That's Hollywood Brown, right? That's
Hollywood Brown's
Hollywood
speedster
from So AJ Brown, big game, 6 catches, 96. I mean, obviously Devontae had the big game with 100 yards, but I mean, you had a bunch of different guys. Dallas Goedert, very productive, six catches, 60 yards. I mean, their offense was really, really, really good in that first half, and they weren't necessarily bad in the second half. It's just it just blows my mind that with the limited opportunities that Kansas City actually had, that they were able to win the game. Because if you just did a box score scouting of this game,
no chance you think they won. Yeah, no chance you think that the Chiefs won that game. And I'm glad you brought up the AJ Brown moments real quick, because that was one thing I wanted to talk about. Did y'all his touchdown? That dude, if you don't remember it, go back and watch it again. What he does is absolutely like masterful. Like it's a beautiful like route that like what he does at the end of the route. Ball's in the air and he's running, and the DB is like ahead of him, so has position on him, is in perfect place to make a play. He cuts inside underneath the defender, makes him start turning towards the ball and adjust his whole body. And what does he do next? He goes, "Up, just kidding," goes back around him and over the top and wide open at that point. I mean,
I don't know how
he put that dude.
I don't know how
he did. He ran a Euro
it.
step route.
That's what he did. Like
mid route.
He gave like a little. He turned his shoulders, got inside of him, and then just stepped. I mean, that has to be something they work on and practice a ton, because the timing of that was impeccable. I mean, how did he know he had enough time? You're 100% right.
And he had to, like, it was important for him to adjust back outside, because if he doesn't adjust back over top like that, the ball's overthrown at that point. So he undercuts the route. Like, he undercuts the route to make the guy, the defender, bite in and then goes around him. I mean, this is why the ball's already in the air. It's almost there. Like, that's the ability to do that. Like Jonathan said, he hits the Euro step mid route, and just that play, I remember watching it going, just, I mean, my God, like that's just like 99 overall route running right there. Like, just 100%. Absolutely beautiful.
100%. But you also have to give credit to Hurts on that, for him to put the air on the ball.
Throw. Yeah, it was a great throw.
Because if he doesn't put just the correct amount of air on that, it's incomplete anyway.
Top to bottom, it's a great play. But that wide receiver just, I mean, absolutely. That AJ Brown, I mean, that I wasn't like the biggest fan of him. I mean, he's good. I've never like disliked him or anything like that. But watching that, I gained so much respect for him on one play, just because that the mental side to that, to know, hey, I'm gonna step inside real quick and it's gonna make him bite in, but I know I have to get back over top. So it's the mental side to be able to know that you can do that, and then the physical ability to then adjust your body back around like that. And like in the speed of that game, that means it comes natural to you. That's something like you can practice a lot and stuff like that, but like that's natural at that point. When you can do it like that, that was
Well,
play of a game for me for like from the wide receivers. And I know Devontae Smith made some incredible catches and took some hits in that game as well, which I was impressed with, by the way. I was actually talking about it in the game going, I mean, the small guy that he is, you know, he just doesn't get hit that much because he's quick and he gets out of there and stuff. But like he took a couple of really, really big hits, one going down the sideline and absolutely got decleated. I'm talking his feet were like 3 feet above his head kind of thing, and just pops back up like it was nothing. I mean, that's tough.
You know, one of the things that I love to talk about, and I hope you guys do too, because we're going to get into it in the next couple of episodes that we're going to have, is roster development, right? And giving up what it was a second round pick, if I'm not mistaken, that Philadelphia sent to Tennessee for AJ Brown. That has to be one of the best trades. You know, I mean, it paid off. I mean, if he doesn't do anything else, the guy, you know, that was a huge play for them. That was an amazing play. And then, you know, for the Chiefs getting Pacheco, that's something that Jonathan was talking about a little bit ago about Clyde Edwards-Helaire is not producing, right? So they go out and get this guy in the draft. I had no idea who Pacheco was. If you would have asked me before the season who he was, where he's from, I had no clue who he was.
Man, I didn't know who he was until about 6 weeks ago.
Right, and they get this guy in the draft. And
a bunch of casuals.
Sky Moore. Did you guys know who Sky Moore was?
I did know Sky Moore.
I knew him because there was some people that were pretty high on him during the draft process.
I did know Sky Moore.
They bring him in to replace Tyreek Hill. Did he replace him? No, absolutely not. He didn't replace him, but the guy was productive, and he made a play in the biggest game of the year. So, I mean, it's these little moves that these teams make, successful teams make, and that propel them to win championships. And that's why I always get so frustrated with the Falcons, is because it seems like these other teams are able to do that, and the Falcons more recently haven't been able to do that. Like the Falcons getting Taylor Gabriel, which was a great pull by one of you guys or whoever it was that was talking about Turbo Taylor earlier today. We got him for nothing from the Cleveland Browns off their practice squad, I think it was, and he ended up being one of the best receivers in the NFL for that 1 year. And then he takes
then he got a huge deal from Chicago, which he can thank Kyle Shanahan for.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's the roster development part, man. You have to be able to find those guys. And
you have to find somebody that you see something in and that you go, hey, I can make him great.
I could use that.
Have to be able, I can.
Everybody out here trying to be Alex Anthopoulos. That's
but here's the thing. We talked about this, I think in our chat one day, and it's like you have to be able, like everybody's offensive system is different, right? So it may not be working with Cleveland. He may not be going off with Cleveland, but the Falcons go and Shanahan go, hey, I can make him look great. I got it. That's my favorite thing to do right now, Jonathan.
They have other parts, right? At that time, the Falcons had other parts, and he fit perfectly into what they needed. And that's the part. That's the most fun part about these football teams is the offseason, putting together these rosters. I almost love the offseason more than I actually love the season, because I love to see the way that these teams come together. I love the draft process. I love
the strategic side of it.
Yeah, I love that part of it, trying to figure out who's gonna make your roster, who's gonna be the integral part that nobody else sees, but you can see it yourself. And Shanahan's great at that. A lot of these guys are. That Green Bay team that they had for a while, that they put together. I mean, I remember when they came down here and blew the Falcons out. If you remember the year before, the Falcons were good again. I mean, like none of those guys went on to be great anywhere else, but that was like the most dominant wide receiver group I can remember since the Greatest Show on Turf in the Rams.
So Dan, talking about the Falcons, and you love the offseason. I think you needed the Falcons dropped like an 8-minute video today on their Twitter feed, and it's kind of supposed to get the fans pumped up about the future and especially this upcoming year. No,
I will not watch that.
Seriously, you need. I'm dead serious right now, Dan. Like you should go watch, and I think you'll feel a lot differently about the Falcons after that, because I think there's a lot of promising things that are said in that video, and it made me feel better as a fan hearing some things that were said in that video from the players and like Grady Jarrett and Drake London. So you need to go watch that. And make you feel a lot better.
I hope Arthur Blank's not in it talking about dead bodies.
No, there's no Arthur Blank in there. All right, I got a fun closing segment, because since we're kind of putting an end chapter on the NFL because that season's over, and now we're kind of transitioning into, we got March Madness coming up. We got MLB seasons coming up with NBA. The playoffs are kind of looming in the distance.
So we still got little bit
we
of
got a
everything.
lot of great things that we could still talk about on this podcast, and the MLB being one of them. And I don't know if you guys saw the tweet that was released today, but there's some announcements about rule changes and whatnot in the MLB.
Mhm.
And one thing that they're implementing is that for position players to pitch, you can now only do it if the game is in extra innings, or if you're down by 8. I think it's down by 8 in the 9th inning, or you're winning by 10 in the 9th inning. That's the only time you can pitch position players now. And I just want y'all's thoughts on that, because when I saw it, I was like, is this even necessary? Like, why are we trying to regulate this part of the game? Because there's been some really cool moments that's produced, like Anthony Rizzo striking out Freddie Freeman a couple years back, Travis d'Arnaud doing the flop job in the batter's box when he got beamed with a 68-mile-per-hour fastball against the Nationals, I want to say, and laid there like a starfish. Like, that's produced some fun moments in baseball. And I think that's the whole thing that fans have been itching for in baseball, and even non-fans, is we want the sport to be fun and attractive to other people. And I think that kind of puts a damper on it. So I just wanted y'all's perspective. Like, what do you think of that? Is it necessary? What's the goal of that? I don't know.
So it's not necessary, because when do they do that? They do it when they're winning by a large amount, or if they're losing by a large amount. And usually not even if you're winning too much. It's usually if you're the losing team. So like, to implement a rule to make it like why? What's the point? You can't do it. Don't do it unless that's the only time anybody does it anyways. You only do it late in the game, like extra innings, when you run out of players, if something like that happens. And you only do it when you're losing by a lot. Yeah, like, this isn't like, since when is this a problem? What are you trying to regulate?
There is a stipulation in the MLB rule book where it's called making a mockery of the game, right? And so you can step in as an official if somebody's making a mockery of the game. But I don't think it needs to be regulated. I don't think it's being abused. And also, there are situations where there are players who were pitchers who are not current pitchers. Like Jeff Francoeur would go in as a pitcher, and people forget he was arguably one of the best pitchers in the country when he came out of high school.
He also went back and was a minor league pitcher after his career.
But dude, he would go in and he would strike out the side. So you telling me I can't bring in Jeff Francoeur to pitch an inning and he strikes out the side? Like, now I get it when you got the guy who's going in there throwing 50-mile-an-hour lob balls. That's making a mockery of the game, right? But like, you have what is that? There's a shortstop that throws off the mound, throws 101 miles an hour. Oh God, what shortstop is it? I can't remember who it was, but they let him pitch in the game.
I don't know. That's the only one I can think of.
No,
I don't know either, but I know that like Andrelton Simmons was a pitcher originally as well, and they switched because he had a freaking cannon.
Jacob deGrom was a shortstop coming up.
Furcal could throw 100 miles an hour off the mound. So
I just think that, like, I don't know that there's ever been a point in time, I would say, where like teams are making a mockery of the game when doing it. I think it's more so of a move of like, we're waving the white flag. We do not want to burn any arms in our bullpen.
We're getting our butt kicked right now. It's because you're getting your butt kicked. That's when you do it.
If anything, like I said, it's just producing some more fun for the game. It gives some laughs, maybe. Some players get to have some pretty cool moments of getting to hit off one another. Anthony Rizzo and Freddie Freeman will always get to have that moment together. And I just think, if anything, to me, it felt like the MLB was just saying, like, just don't remember, like, we can govern anything that we want. And that's just I feel like that was just their way of saying, like, we can put an end to this if we feel like it. And so we're just like, this is the first thing that we're going to do. And like, don't think that like we're uncontrolled or anything like that.
Yeah, you start doing that, and like, you're gonna have like, if they take it away to where position players can't pitch or something like that in general, they're gonna have like a huge problem, because like, man, that the reason that they do it is because it's saving their bullpen arms in a point of the game that's way out of their control to win. Like, they're not going to win it, and so like, they're, like you said earlier, they are waving the white flag, and it saves their arms. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, he's saying in the comments that he thought it's any inning. It is the 9th inning. I'm looking at the rule right now. So it's only in the 9th inning, too, that you can do this as well. So it's only in the last inning of the ball game.
I had a fun question, if you'll entertain me here for a second.
Oh, God. I'll always entertain you.
Oh, right, God. It's a Dan question.
No, so listen, they were talking on the radio today. Do you have to win a championship to be considered an all-time great quarterback?
No.
Oh. Do you want to? How long you want to be here? You want to be here for 30 minutes? You want to be here for 10 seconds?
I'm just going to short answer and say no. You don't have to.
I don't think
it does it
either.
Is it something that they? Is it something that they pretty much require to get into the Hall of Fame? Essentially, kind of, because like
BS
there's
too. That's BS.
yeah, it is. But well, I say that, but like I mean, Matt Ryan's going to be in the Hall of Fame. I think Matt Ryan's
Look,
going to be in the Hall of Fame, and he's not going to win a Super Bowl. So I
This
think that
whole
I think he makes it.
this whole thing that a player's greatness is only as good as many championship trophies that his have is bogus.
It's
Because
a team sport, man.
I don't care what's now, unless you're playing golf where it's literally
Yeah.
just you, or tennis where it's literally just you. That's fine. That's a fine meter to rank somebody and kind of put a ranking on their career as to how great they are. But when you're talking about baseball, when you're talking about basketball, and when you're talking about football, how many different factors do you have in a game, in a moment? How many players impact the game more than just one singular player? There's
I mean-
too many factors to place like championships. It takes all the pieces have to come together for you to win a championship. And so that's why I think it's absolutely bogus that when you're talking about how great a player is or what his legacy looks like, about that you pin it down to how many championships does he have. Because if we're doing
Yeah.
that, then Bill Russell is the greatest athlete of all time. If that's how we're going to play that game, then give it to Bill Russell. MJ and LeBron, neither of them are in the conversation.
Or John Havlicek.
Yeah. Like if
He
that's
was
how we're
on
going
those
to do
teams
this.
too. Yeah, but
Hey,
but-
or Chad Henne, who has just as many Super Bowls as Peyton Manning. I mean, as a backup quarterback after 15 years in the league, who retired by
guy.
like, hey, I'm glad that just popped him up. He just retired after the game yesterday, but he's got just as many Super Bowls as Peyton Manning and a couple other big name like quarterbacks. Like it's a team sport. A quarterback is the only position in the NFL that's judged like that too, by the way. Like a quarterback is the only one. You could be a wide receiver, running back, and never win a championship and be a no doubt Hall of Famer, like just based on stats alone.
So they were talking about you cannot include Dan Marino in any list of top 5 quarterbacks because he doesn't have a championship. And that's where that comes from, because
Please.
I wasn't the biggest Dan Marino fan, but to say he's not one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time,
I
Dan's
mean,
not a
pretty
fan of
silly.
Dan.
Yeah,
All right.
no, I hate that argument. It makes no sense to me. You're going to put all of it on one single player as a quarterback, but that's the only position that you do that to in the NFL. Like every other position, they don't care about that, but that's the only position they try to make. They bring that up in the argument, and I get it. There's guys out there like Tom Brady, and yeah, Tom Brady has done a lot to win those championships for each of the teams that he's played on, but there are so many franchises in the NFL that haven't even won a Super Bowl before. Shouts to the Falcons. Like, so you're telling me that no quarterback or that has played at the Falcons can be considered like a great quarterback because they never won a Super Bowl? Like that, to me, that's not a fair statement or fair assessment of like the talent that you had. Like it's just not. But it is what it is, I guess. That's what they need to stop focusing so much on.
Man, if this is what the content during the offseason, I guess you could call it, is going to look like, I'm excited for this, because those last two conversations, I'm absolutely here for it. And I hope the people and the listeners are too, because that's fun right there.
It is. But I think that's going to wrap it up for this week. It's been fun this NFL season to do this with you guys. I've watched more NFL football this year than I have in a very long time. It took me back to when I was younger and I used to watch every single game all the time. Did that this year for the most part, and it was a lot of fun for me. So I look forward to doing it again in the future, and I look forward to paying more attention in the offseason than I usually do as well, to everybody, not just like one particular team. So we plan to bring a lot of content in the offseason about the NFL still when things pop up and arise that way. And then we've got plenty of other content that we are going to be bringing in like we talked about earlier. So I'm excited. Y'all hang in with us, and we will be back in a week or so with some more content for you. And then just shouts out to the Twitter page. Pay attention to the Twitter page on there, and that's where we'll make some announcements about content and things like that. So
Hey, we'd be remiss if we didn't say to hell with Kentucky.
yeah, how about them? How about them?
How
hell
about
with
them
Kentucky.
dogs?
How about them?
Y'all have a great week. We'll see y'all later.